We decided, we had our Architectural Heritage Board meeting yesterday. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Julie Wagner, with just an appointed member of this board. We decided yesterday morning that we should probably do just a quick PowerPoint to give you some of the highlights of this document. I'm sure you've read it. And then we'll just answer questions and try to see what things you like and don't like about it. The process is started through an $18,000 grant from the National Park Service and the Kentucky Heritage Council. The Heritage Council has signed off on this document. They have to approve the content in order for us to get the grant money. If they don't approve of it and we were to pass it, we would have to spend the funds out of our own coffers, so, or pay that grant back. So we've tried to comply with their guidelines and their required language. The first thing is, let's kind of go through some of the terms, and we like to use acronyms because we're all sort of into that. DAHB, of course, is the Danville Heritage Board. COA, that is the certificate, sort of like your permit that you get when you bring a project. So it is a certificate of appropriateness, and you're going to hear that word appropriateness throughout this document. CLG is, of course, certified local government, and that is the state and National Park Service. Wikipedia says there's 419 incorporated cities in Kentucky and only 23 meet the standards to be a certified local government. The guidelines have to follow the Secretary of Interior standards. Those are in your book. But the purpose of these guidelines on page 7 and 8, you'll see that, is to take modern day treatments and apply them to historic buildings and still protect what makes us historic. The purpose of the guidelines is to, again, help us achieve the vision of having a beautiful preserved district. And I think we've done a great job here in Danville of doing that. And it's also to give guidance. You'll see this document, and we'll touch on this. It's very much an educational piece. It's not a mandate anymore. It's not intended to be prescriptive. It's intended to be qualitative. We want flexible solutions to these permit requests that come before us. Every project will be treated now on a case-by-case basis. Beforehand, if it didn't meet the rigid standards, then we couldn't even consider it. Now we can. The good thing about the new guidelines is it becomes part of a streamlined process, I think even better than it was before. Most of the stricter standards always prevail. I think you've heard that. Now the stricter standard in many cases stands with planning and zoning, which they have to go to anyways. And there's nothing more frustrating than to have us approve something, they take it to planning and zoning, and it doesn't meet their standards, and then they have to come back and start all over. So it's much more streamlined, and it also, being in the codes office, helps the codes office make sure that everything is compliant. So we feel like it's much easier for the property owner to work through the process. Just a couple of the Secretary of Interior standards that we think are important. There's a complete list on page 8. But some of the highlights that we try to remember is don't early up your building, don't make it look older than it was. Try to use it for what it was intended. If not, let's find the least damaging use for the building. Don't remove the features that makes the building what it is. Preserve the alterations that have become significant. So sometimes you'll see a treatment on a building that wasn't popular in the 60s, but now those modern buildings are becoming historic. So we have to consider those treatments as well. Repair rather than replace. Use gentle cleaning techniques. And do not destroy the character. There's quite a few standards, but I just wanted to touch on a few of them. This is the district. I don't know if you have a copy of the map. I thought it would be helpful for you to see the boundaries. Takes in KSD, down East Main, up to Center College. So, any questions on the district? All right, we're going to go through some of the significant changes, and then we'll break it down by section, and then we'll some of the changes is it's more user-friendly. You'll see lots of graphics. If you look at the old set of guidelines and the new set, there's many more pictures, descriptions, charts, ways to understand what they're trying to get at through the language. The glossary of terms is much better than the old set. It's reorganized, and instead of having multiple documents for people to work through, it's now one document. There's a wonderful section that explains the architectural styles, the heritage of Danville, different periods of buildings, and it's really worth the read. We also combined residential and commercial in one document. It's very educational. If you read through this, you'll see it encourages you to do something a certain way, but it also explains why that's important. And I don't think we had that in the old document. It took away prohibited, not allowed, and went with a looser term of discouraged or not encouraged. All that's been changed. We just really feel like it's less restrictive than it was before. I know there's some questions out there about that, and we'll try to answer those. For example, signage was always 20%. You could not exceed 20% of the window surface. That was the way it is. If you were 1 inch over, you had to redesign your sign. Now we don't have that. As long as you meet the 25% of planning and zoning, we're good with it. So planning and zoning becomes a stricter standard than the Heritage Board, and really eliminates that need to work with us to get the size so correct. They can just really focus on planning and zoning. Modern technology, we had nothing in there for solar panels, satellite dishes, towers, any of that. There's now language in there to help us work through any modern technology that we don't even know about yet. The way this is worded, it will help us deal with those. There's also a wonderful section 2, that really walks you through the process. We did not have that in the old document. A property owner who isn't familiar with how to work through the city processes, they will see that. I think it's on page 22, if you want to look at that. I think it's a great sort of flow chart. It gets you through what happens if your project's denied. What is your next step? What if it's approved? Then what do I do? So this is something brand new that we didn't have before. Routine maintenance, paint colors, exterior changes where you're just painting over painted surface, none of that has to go before us. And that's on page 16, and that is the way it's been all along. There's also, and we'll discuss this more at the end, a list of what the consultant feels like we could fast track for property owners. This is a big issue with Tom. He really feels like we're making people come before us for things that could very easily be approved in-house. And so we'd like to get your thoughts on that and some guidance on where you think we could improve that. It's more about what you can do and how to do it, and less about what you can't do, and I think you'll see that in these new guidelines. The old document used words like not permitted, shall not do, whatever, will not be approved. It's not appropriate, here's why, or it'll say it is encouraged, and here's why. The glossary gives us a description of how we interpret appropriateness, and so I thought we should all kind of have that in front of our mind. I see a typo, and I apologize for that. But we do evaluate these buildings for what's appropriate through these guidelines, but it's not a mandate anymore. If it's appropriate, that's what we're issuing as a certificate of appropriateness. So we've tried to kind of keep that in the forefront of our mind. Section 4 is what they call the universal guidelines, and most projects are going to fall under Section 4. And these apply to both residential and commercial, and they are your basic standards for things like windows, water treatments. I think if you go to the 44 starts Section 4. If there's a conflict or it's something that you don't understand, then you flip back to the commercial section for more information, because the treatments for homes might be a little different than buildings. But the universal guidelines are standards that apply to both. If you turn to page 59, I wanted to kind of give you an example of how the guidelines work, these universal guidelines. Make sure I get to the right page. Windows are probably the most important thing when you redo a building. It changes the look of the building, so there's quite a bit of focus on windows in these guidelines. It does, if you look at under objective, it does address replacement windows, and that was always a no-no before, but it helps the property owner understand if you can't save your windows, here's the parameters to put back windows that are appropriate for your building. And so that's a positive way of handling what could be, if y'all remember the Hub Gilcher windows was difficult. We feel like this will help property owners understand what they're doing. Let's see. Under residential on page 70, there's some really interesting changes that I think are positives. I think we feel like they're positives. It's much more about preservation, ongoing maintenance, and less about reactive maintenance on properties. It does address things like hardy planks, fiber cement board, how you can use those, because those are modern treatments that the old guidelines don't even touch on. It does not include language now about roofing materials. You still need a COA, but we're not boxed into what type of roofing materials that the property owners need to use anymore. It does not address gutter materials anymore, and those are big for a homeowner. There's a nice educational section about streetscapes, about how to handle your streetscape. We don't do landscaping. We are not monitoring that anymore, which is great for us. But it does kind of give the property owners some idea of what is a good street design for the pedestrians in the neighborhood. It also put a nice section in there about how you site a new construction in a built environment. And I put a little graphic there to show just a little bit of moving a house forward really changes the feel of the neighborhood, and it sort of explains why you might want to put that house back a little bit. And those are things that we didn't have well defined in the old document. Go to page 84, you get into the commercial section. Some of the changes are the things like awnings. The only real numbers that it gives for awnings anymore is 7 feet up and projecting more than 4 feet out. And that is new. We did not have that in the old guidelines. It explains how to attach an awning to a building. And the one no, I think in this whole section is about backlit plastic awnings, and that's the kind of awning that it's addressing, are these plastic bubble, I call them bubble awnings. So that is something that it does say is not appropriate. Again, signage has been loosened up a little bit. It's a recommendations instead of mandates. There's a lot of talk about how to design a sign to make it complement the district over this is what you have to do to put a sign up, which is the old way. Now it's more of a piece about working through the process before you even bring it to us. You can also, it does allow now for brand names we didn't allow before. So Ernst could have a Nike sign in the window you couldn't before if it passes planning and zoning. So that's a big change, I think, for us. Public art. This section is totally new to everybody. We didn't have anything to do with public art. We asked for the consultant to help us come up with some things. It does allow us to do mural review, but not freestanding art. There's a big difference. And the conversation that we're hearing in the community is about sculptures and street art. That wouldn't fall under us because it's not really affecting the building. But the murals would fall under these guidelines. It also distinguishes between art and advertising, which is, I think, a good clarification for property owners that may want to put the name of their company across the side of the building, and that would be considered a sign. And it's pretty clear in the new guidelines. We have discussed amongst ourselves about is it in the best interest of the community for the 7 members of the Architectural Review Board to be the only group to look over a mural and approve it. We would approve the placement, but not the content. And so our question is, do you want us to approve the content? Are you open to forming a board that would approve the content? Because we're not all artists. So we could say if it's appropriate to a building, but maybe not the content. We're just not clear about that. I think that's something you're going to have to tell us how you want that handled. So just a conclusion is, we think they're more user-friendly, much more educational, a lot more problem-solving in the document than before. We do have the 2 questions about public art and about fast-tracking easy applications through the codes office. Those are 2 things that we were hoping we could have a discussion about. And then any questions or concerns that you have for us.
Well, I have a few questions. I guess I should use my microphone. I have a few questions, and since you mentioned it last, I will ask it first. When you were talking about what's considered the company name on the side of the building, we have one of those. And is that already in violation, or would it be in violation?
Are you talking about the McDowell?
McDaniel?
McDaniel, yeah.
Yes.
No, they're, because they actually came to us and they're completely within guidelines because that building is so huge and long on that side. So they're within the current parameters.
So it was meant as a sign, not a mural?
It was,
Okay.
yes.
It was a sign. It was within the parameters of
Okay,
current regulations.
that's fine.
And there had been one historically in that same space.
Okay. You said you're not policing landscaping anymore. Is anyone going to do that?
I don't think so. We asked the consultant to clarify that for us because we were having people come in and say, we want to plant some lawns outside, and according to the guidelines, they had to come to the architectural review board to plant a bush or a shrub. So
Right.
we just felt like that was a silly thing.
And there's also, there's the, help me remember the names of the committees. There's the downtown, there's 2 other committees that address
Streetscape and
trees and,
beautification.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, and beautification.
And so
Yeah.
there's, if there's already 2, there's no reason for us to be adding another layer to that.
Well, I don't think that that's their purpose, but, okay.
But, well, that's an excellent point for clarification then.
Right, yeah. Streetscape and beautification do those things for the city.
Are you?
And not necessarily, are they going to police private properties? That's not, that's not their purpose, I don't think. But
Okay.
that's just something that needs to be
Are you
clarified
thinking that we should reconsider and have? the
well, I don't
consultant-
know. That's,
Okay.
I'm just asking. You said that you all don't require landscape.
I guess, do you all feel it's important for us to review landscape?
I'm just, that's just something that jumped out at me,
Okay,
so. And I had another question, but I don't remember what it was. Okay, somebody else while I remember my other question.
Do you like the new document? Do you feel like it's on the right path?
I think it's well done, and I also thought, in my attempt to read it, it was user-friendly for someone to be able to read it and follow a process. I've not read the entire document. I piecemealed the sections I thought I was most interested in, but I think it's well done, done real well. And as far as the thing about landscaping, until my fellow commissioner mentioned it.
I just was asking.
I said until you mentioned it, I really hadn't given it any thought. I've been in some landscaping, but I don't know.
Oh, I remember my question. Don't turn my microphone off. So what happens if someone doesn't follow the guidelines and they go ahead and do something and it's in violation? Are there penalties? Do they have to take it down? And who's responsible for that? So does that fall to codes?
Yeah.
So they would be in violation of codes and then the appropriate,
Yes, and then
Okay.
that we follow through that process and could lead up to penalties especially with the new rules and stuff we have, so.
Or they'd have to-
And we have had it happen where they have to ask forgiveness, so if they've done something. And we've had situations where they've had to fix it. Example, the surgery center with the windows up there. We put a stop work order on the project and they had to go back and put the right windows in. So that doesn't usually happen, but it can.
Sure, I was going to do five. First of all, I think you folks did a great job. Looks like a lot of hard work. I think that one of the questions that you were asking, Commissioner Terry, because they weren't clear where they should probably be on plantings and so forth. And it seems to me that you guys are a little bit more advisory because it goes down that first slide that you brought up where it has to go through P&Z and codes and standards anyway. So maybe that's being addressed beyond them. That's what I'm thinking, unless I'm not seeing this correctly.
I guess I don't want to leave landscaping hanging out there. We had a proper, I'll just use Bernie from the Methodist Church and helping here, brought in, he just wanted to swap out some shrubs, was it? And put
Like trim some trees, change
Yeah.
some trees,
Yeah.
put
And
some
it
shrubs.
seems so silly that he had to come get a COA from us to do some basic landscaping. And it really woke us up that is in here, and why is it in here? Do we need to be doing that?
And he was also the first one to come before us, and as
Yeah.
long as I've been on the board, so that means all these, residential and commercial, how much other stuff is going on that's not coming before us, and
Right.
what that would add to our workload if, for no good reason, in my opinion.
The only thing I think that it does probably need to be mentioned is landscaping when it comes to like parking lots. And we do require screening of parking lots. That would be landscaping that we probably would want to have a conversation with of how they're going to screen those parking lots. But to come to us and say, I want to put a holly bush out here in front of E. Felton's building, that seems so silly.
I think we had to have a special call meeting so that his bushes wouldn't
Yeah,
die.
yeah. That's right.
Next meeting.
Yeah. So
Sitting
that's
above
what we,
ground.
that's
Now,
probably
you're right, I
better.
forgot.
Yeah, I was just clarifying, see what that meant.
Yeah.
But does it need to be in there, for example, the parking lot example you just gave us?
It is in here for that. For parking lots it is, and I should have said that. We should have said that, but otherwise, we don't feel like we want to tell people they have the right holly bush for that period of building in there. And you just,
Should it be petunias or geraniums or?
Right,
or
yeah.
flag-
I was just trying to clarify what you meant by that.
I'd go artificial every time.
you're in
You
the
go with
silk
pea
phone.
gravel every time. What do you say?
Pea gravel, yeah.
Artificial.
Artificial.
You know, like I said, it's just a lot of material to
Yeah.
cover, and I probably don't know enough to ask the questions I need to ask at this point. And I do want to hear, public comment, of course, but like I've said before, I think you all covered a lot of bases, and I think you're moving in the direction that people wanted to see, which is a little more, I don't know, positive maybe,
Yeah.
or, we want to promote
Yeah.
the investment downtown that has its own unique issues and benefits. But we want to make that something that people want to do and they don't have to jump through a ring of fire to do it. So I think that's heading in the right direction, and I appreciate that. After we hear some folks, there may be some things that we need to tweak, but I think we can do that. So I look forward to, getting more into it and hearing more about it.
Yeah, I think those are great comments. Also, you folks are here, you've done a lot of work. Bridget's here, she's on board. We have a new person in place for P&Z. I don't think that he'd have anything negative to say about what you're doing, but he might have some comments that are going to be helpful. My personal discussion with him is he wants to be very positive as you guys are moving forward and be business friendly. So, it'd be good for all of us to hear from him as well and see what his comments are.
And we are required to take it before planning and zoning as the next part of this whole process. You will get a full review. And you wanted to mention
I was just going to mention, at our meeting yesterday, we were just kind of thinking back. I think I'm almost to my second year, and we've only denied maybe 3 projects in 2 years. So we really do try to figure out a way to make them work. And one project was plank, painting plank, and as cool as that was, we really wanted to approve for them to paint the back of their building.
Really did.
There was just no way we could do that because it was become a sign. So some of those
It'll
issues.
become what, a sign?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's something we can,
We really do try as a
We want-
board to approve them if we can figure out a way, so.
And the sign ordinance is something that does need to be reviewed because it's an appendices in here, but we can't make a decision that doesn't agree with it. So that's something planning and zoning is going to need to look at in the future if you want to change it.
Right.
And also to bring it in compliance with other legislation out there.
And also, just to note that these guidelines were written to conform to P and Z, even if P and Z changes, these will still be in effect. So we don't have to go back and rewrite our ordinance, our guidelines, just because they do theirs.
Lots of effort to make it user-friendly, consumer-friendly, business-friendly. And for the time I've been on the board, and I think Bridget would, if we've had a business that needed something and they wanted to open Monday, and we could meet the notifications, the notice of a meeting, public meetings rules, if we could get a quorum together, we'd meet with that business and try to get them going. But one of the things that we've advocated for years, and there's a little bit of a hurdle here for us, but is if you come in with a sign and it meets the 25% and everything's there, someone here should be able to go, thank you, have a nice day, go put your sign up. You shouldn't have to wait 24 hours or to the next monthly meeting to get that approved. So there's a few hurdles of having some sort of professional available for that, and we may be able to handle it by contract. I actually think our new P&Z person maybe has some ideas how to address that, so that's an example of working together.
Yeah, he seems to have several good ideas of streamlining procedures and things
Yeah.
that I liked.
Kind of sounds like the whole city's on the same page now. We're kind of moving in the same direction of trying to be, I don't think the city's ever been negative, but there might have been a little bit of perception that we have to clean up. And so that's good to hear. I might ask Mayor Pro Tem Atkins, since we have some guests here, do you want to do any hear the public or not? Just
Well, that's always acceptable to me, but the rest of the commission needs to speak up. Anyone opposed to hearing from the public? Give them the 3-minute limit, 30-second limit. Let's hear from them.
I'm
I
like
think
you.
that's a yes.
I'm never opposed.
Yeah, we can do that.
All right. Is anyone from the public desiring to make comments, raise questions? And if so, would you please,
Do you want them to go up here or you want me to hand them a microphone?
you can handle the microphone. I was going to ask them to please identify themselves.
And I'd just like to remind them that we have not read the whole thing, so you may be ahead of us if you've seen it somehow, some other way, so
You didn't read the whole thing?
I confess.
Well, and just to clarify, this is a workshop. We don't expect your approval at this. It's a start in the process. So if that helps take you off the hook any.
I like that. I will say we didn't get it till yesterday, late.
Well, I got mine at noon time yesterday. What's wrong with you? Anyone desiring to speak? I'm going to go back to you.
Okay.
have the opportunity.
Thank you for your input.
Well, and there will be other opportunities down the line for input from the public as well.
And we can also be emailed, texted, accosted on the street in any number of ways, so.
I will say, we took tremendous amount of public comment at our meetings and really labored over the input we got from the merchants and businesses. Some of the things we couldn't change because it met the Heritage Council standards, like using the word appropriateness. I know that there's a lot of angst about that word, using that word, but the Heritage Council sat down and said you were applying for a certificate of appropriateness, so it is a better document for you to explain what is appropriate. Doesn't mean that if it's good for the district and good for the building, we would consider it. I think everybody has said that. we would want it. If it's good for the district, we want it. So, but that's why we've stayed with the word appropriate. A, it met the Heritage Council standards, and B, it sort of falls into why they're coming to us in the first place. It's for a certificate of appropriateness.
We even had even broader amount of comments on Facebook.
Yes,
A
yes.
lot of people who didn't come to the meetings did
Yes,
write tomes of information of their opinions.
yeah. And there were great comments. Some of them were fantastic ideas, like there was a metal awning, putting a scroll work metal black awning instead of that wasn't supposed to be allowed, and those are beautiful. And if anybody wants to invest, probably $100,000
They're
in an
welcome
awning,
to.
we want them to do that,
And
so.
if you haven't seen the Facebook page and you're on Facebook, I highly recommend going to visit. Bridget can send the link. It not only had a lot of commentary about things that we can address, it also had a lot of commentary about things that the city can address, but we cannot. So it's just a good read in general.
There's been a lot of talk about murals,
Yes.
so can you address that a little bit? And
Well, so our goal we can address what goes on a building. And so our concerns with murals are, one, that it is not going to damage the building. So we do have the rule that if the building is brick and is not painted, you cannot paint it. So any building that's already natural brick cannot have a mural painted directly on the brick. But you could have a mural painted on something else and then mounted appropriately onto the brick so it doesn't hurt the building.
For instance, a large, there are applications out there, just huge vinyl
Yeah.
signs that can be affixed to the side of the building that look like a mural.
Yeah, and they're beautiful, and so we definitely want to allow that kind of thing.
Is that a guideline that you have to go by, or is that just something you all felt was?
That's a
was appropriate?
secretary, about painting the brick.
Yes.
That's a Secretary of Interior standard. There are buildings in Danville that I think could benefit from a coat of paint, but that's the city.
Well, and I will-
You know, and we would,
There are exceptions. For example, if
Yeah.
you have brick that doesn't match, is poorly, when they were filling in windows and they matched everything horribly, it looks visually poor, then we can examine painting a building that's brick. So it's not completely prohibited, you cannot do it, but in general, we're gonna say no.
Well, I was thinking, some buildings, I can't think of one right off the top of my head, have differing kinds of brick. That to me
that's
looks
what,
bad.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I can think of one real close to City Hall that,
But they've never come to ask to paint either, so.
yeah. But there is one that I know is brick, but it's got a little hodgepodge of paint here, window closed in here, old brick, new brick.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
To
look
me,
pretty.
would look better.
Right.
And she pulled
Painted.
it's on page 102 is the mural
Yeah.
talks. And so when it comes to murals, I mean, it's one of those things where I would love to see artwork on the walls, but then it also comes down to, do you want us making, decisions about artwork that's going on walls that will probably be up for years, or perhaps have a wider base of community input for that could also perhaps deal with sculptural and other art issues. It keeps coming up over and over and over again in our committee, but also in community discussions.
So your recommendation would be to have a separate committee handle that, or separate
Well, I think
group?
maybe an ad hoc group of us, beautification and art.
Art professionals,
Yeah.
art people. We have, goodness knows, we have a fine selection of people to choose
Yeah.
from in this community.
We would
And I believe
decide.
Mimi Becker might.
A number of years ago, 2012.
Oh,
I remember this, yeah.
You should talk about freight train. A number of years ago, the Arts Commission was charged with doing some research, which we did, and we presented a document. I still have a copy of that. I think that would be worth looking at in terms of the public art mural question, and I'll be happy to provide additional copies of that to everyone, because I think it does address some of the things that you're talking about from all directions. We did quite a study across the United States, found a couple of communities that sort of met our profile, and it's not a complicated process, but it certainly covers all the things about, temporary, permanent, semi-permanent, all kinds of things like that. So I'll make copies of that and see to it that you have it and give it to you.
Thank you.
There probably should be some body that addresses the content of something like this. not only from an aesthetic perspective, which of course, what one person thinks is beautiful, another doesn't, so that's hard to deal with. But there probably should be some way to avoid something that is truly inappropriate.
Right.
I use Jesus Christ. You all have heard me say, we're going to have a mural of Jesus on the side of a building, which we all would probably be okay with, but is that appropriate in public art?
Right,
And
right.
we're an arm of you, so really should the city be deciding that on their own? Because we're you, so that's why we're bringing it.
Well, there are, other cities and a lot of larger cities that instead of having a big blank brick side of a building that may not be attractive, they've painted a mural there. And I mean, there's one in particular in Lexington that, we were just downtown one night and we probably stood there 15 minutes looking at it because there were so many different things in it. And I'd rather see that than a big ugly brick wall. And then you have the places that have the angel wings where you can walk up to and, take your picture and, just those are sort of interactive things that would benefit everyone.
In that document, we had come up with a suggestion of a committee that included, people that would be appropriate for, an engineer, all kinds of. And then if it was a particular thing that might require a special application, then bringing in additional people. So we really did kind of cover all that and make suggestions. So I think you'll find it helpful to look at
But
this.
then if you can't do it on an unpainted brick wall, I think that's where we get into our
Well, then,
conundrum of-
I'm wondering about the Bait, like the John Bait sign. That's a vinyl painted. Is that not correct? It's vinyl and attached to the side of the building?
Shelbyville has 2 large murals they look like they're painted on the brick, but they are literally attached to a frame on the
Yeah.
side of the building.
It's very attractive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you would never know that if you didn't
Yeah.
get up there and look at it.
So modern technology offers us a number of ways to get around the not painting the brick.
Okay.
Well, in regards to whether it's painted on the wall or attached to the wall, someone has to make that decision, and then also
Right.
someone has to be willing to maintain it.
We would
I've seen some
decide
great
if it's
ones go up,
appropriate
but-
location. I think that
Yeah.
would stay with, is that right? Would stay with us?
Yes.
But the content is where do you want your city body being the art police?
Yeah, no. We don't want to be the art police. And the document that Mimi's referencing talks about all of that. Who's going to take care of it? When's it going to come down? If you don't take care of it, what happens to it? All of that. So there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. We have a place to start.
I was
You all have
trying
a
to
place
find
start.
an email that I got earlier today, and I located it. It's in reference to our discussion. This has to do with change in wording regarding windows, doors, facade alterations to buildings in the historic overlay district. The language formerly read that such alterations are not permitted, and then it was changed to is not appropriate in the current draft. And this person has suggested that it's not appropriate as you all's way of bringing about some wiggle room that allows you to consider all proposals. And so this person has said that this sort of comes across negatively, and they would like to see they'd like to suggest some new wording.
Well, so that has already been sent before the Heritage Board, and they have already said, no, you have to use that language. So yes, as much as people would like that language to change, we are not permitted to change it. And again, it does allow for us to say yay or nay, but there better be an argument behind it.
I think when it says something's not appropriate, it pretty much is something we don't want someone to do.
Exactly.
But if someone comes up with a really creative, clever thing that would work well, that doesn't fit the letter of the law, but fits the spirit of it, then we can say, okay.
Yeah. I will also say that a lot of the people, most of the people, if not, and I'm going down the line thinking of everybody who's spoken generally has fabulous ideas. They have really good ideas for the community. They're great. That's not what we see all the time. We don't necessarily see fabulous ideas, and we need to be able to also say, no, you can't do that, and this is why you can't do it. There's reasoning behind it, and that's what this document does. It walks you through it. It says, so it's not appropriate. This is why. there's reasoning behind it, and hopefully explain it a little bit better, and then find a compromise. I mean, that's the other thing, is we want to help people get things done, too.
You're saying the is not appropriate wording, though, meets Department of Interior guidelines?
Yes.
Okay. And so this suggestion that has been sent to us, I guess you all have probably already heard it, but I'm going to read it anyway. Alterations will be carefully considered, weighing the effect of the proposed alteration against the overall historical ambiance and the historical value of the architectural elements. And this person says this would probably meet Department of Interior standards as well. I don't know if it will, but I just want to be sure I shared it because that was sent at 1 o'clock today by a concerned citizen.
Well, and that has come up, that exact issue has come up a few times before, and that's why and Julie specifically asked about that when we were going to get approval.
Specifically asked about the statement I just read.
Appropriateness. Yes, yes.
Because that is not the first, yes, I'm glad that they sent it to you and that you all can see, but that is a very consistent argument that's been coming up.
Well, yeah, they sent it to all of the commissioners, so I wanted to be sure it got out on the table today.
Yeah, we were looking for another word.
Yeah, that's all right.
But the Heritage Council said it is a certificate of appropriateness. That is what the Secretary of Interior calls that process. And so you have to tell them what's appropriate. We didn't do that before, and we were scrambling sometimes to figure out a way to help a project get approved. Usually we can figure something out, but now it's going to be a lot easier. And hopefully by the time they get to us, they understand the ramifications if they put a sealant on their brick. I mean, it's not appropriate to seal your brick because it traps the moisture in there and will make your brick break down. And so hopefully by the time they get to us, they already understand all the ramifications of an issue. And do you think? Yeah.
Well, let me ask this question a different way then. In you all's proposal, the terminology is not appropriate. Does that really means will be considered?
Well, I think that Dana said exactly, if we are not saying, I said not encouraged, we don't want people to do that. It is, if you came to us, I'm trying to think of a good example because it's hard to talk in, generalities here.
An internally lit sign is a good one.
Is an internally lit sign.
Yes.
So you come to us and you say, we want this internally lit sign, which currently is completely not.
It's the plank sign.
The plank sign. Oh.
Yeah.
You know what you let me talk about it then.
You just asked me a question.
The plank sign is, if you look at it, it's a metal sign. It's got an orange, like clear film in it. They wanted to light that sign. They wanted to put a light in there. So at night, you had this nice metal sign that said plank, really very tasteful.
Yeah.
The old guidelines, it was absolutely no internally lit signs, none, period. Here it says they're not appropriate, but we really like that sign. And we can say, well, it's not appropriate, but it is good for your business, it's good for the building, it's good for the district.
It looks nice on the streetscape,
It's not a plastic subway up on the side of a building. That's what that language means, but we were taking it so literal that you couldn't have a light in between those plastic panels because not allowed.
Says it's
Now-
not appropriate, right?
No, it's
No,
not
it said
permitted.
it's not permitted.
Yeah, it was not
It
permitted
has said
before.
not allowed.
Yeah, I understand that, but
Now it says-
I'm just trying to get at what it means today.
Yeah.
If we approve these things and it says it's not appropriate, that means I'm not coming to you all to ask you about that as a possible change to mine.
We laughed and said it's not appropriate to eat a pint of ice cream every night, but if it's in my fridge, I'm going to eat it.
I will say that most people who are inspired and have great ideas, they have not hesitated to come
Right.
before us. Even if it had said not permitted, they'll come and
They'll
ask
ask.
anyway. So I think that the good ideas are going to get through that filter and the bad ideas will hopefully die.
So how did,
Go ahead.
were you finished?
No, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No, I'm gonna change the subject a little bit, so. Not the
Oh,
subject,
go ahead.
but.
No, I'm through. I just want to be sure I covered all that I was asked, we were asked to cover by this citizen, that's all. I'm good.
So how does this, since you're talking about lighted signs, how does this affect the open signs that are flashing or
Well, so currently,
linked?
Well, actually, my legal argument would be that open sign sits inside the window. It's not affixed to the window, it's part of the interior of the store. We in no way regulate the interior of the store. Is that a valid argument?
I don't like those signs. I'm probably the wrong person to ask.
I'd rather see the tasteful plank
Yeah,
sign than
me
the
too.
flashing open
The
signs. That
digital.
was my point.
Yeah.
But we've kind of always maintained that once you get inside that store, We can't regulate your window display.
Right.
And if you attach it to a
Okay.
window, it's a sign.
Okay.
You back off.
I think the signage comes back to all that signage stuff in the sign ordinance we look at, and then how we look at signage all across the board, because when you look at the sign ordinance, you'll see things referencing those kinds of things as well, and it's like, so it's kind of evolved to this point, so we need to address that.
Yeah,
I don't mind a good open and closed sign. I think that's appropriate in a lot of cases.
But how big,
You know, you sleep most of the day, even though you're there, so you can put it closed up.
It does not
Temporary magnetic
allow
sign on my door
flashing
says not here, is that in
motion
violation?
lights,
Could be.
right?
Right.
They can't blink, they can't scroll,
right,
right?
And so,
Just
for
can't
example,
find it.
right now, even in town, we might have one or two signs that are not meeting that standard.
and then how big is allowed? You know, you've got some that are this big and some that are this big.
Correct. And that'll go to planning and zoning now, right?
We have to think about the future too, because just like there are big LED signs that are billboards, we could end up with big flashing, 52-inch screens in windows.
Would this,
It does address motion, somewhere in here. I remember talking about that. I can't find it.
Julie, I'm gonna get us off in the weeds here, but actually, would this permit wayfaring signs? I think it would, wouldn't it? If we were to need wayfaring
That wouldn't,
kiosk type.
yeah, that wouldn't fall to us.
That wouldn't fall under us unless it was going to be attached to the building. It would go with the city.
We've had that
Planning and
question
zoning.
before.
Yeah.
And I think it got kicked down to P and Z again. It was one of those where their guidelines, we were willing to allow it, and then they said no. I think
There's kind of some businesses that were back street, but they wanted
Yeah.
to put
Oh,
their
that,
presence on
yeah.
down by, was it
Yeah,
down by McDaniel's?
off-premise sign.
Possibly.
There's one, to your point, Tom, there is one project that we've tossed around for years and would love to do, and it came from the Gilcher Building windows. And we've had art there over the years, and we don't want to keep damaging the windows, but we can get very inexpensive vinyl, custom vinyl clings that would go in the windows of those. And we've talked about doing a downtown map. We've talked about celebrating different events, but as far as I understand, the current regulations prevented any of that. So I think there's still some P and Z in that. So if we were to put building names and things on it, it becomes P and Z, but if it was just a piece of art, I guess it's here. So it loosens up some of it for us, but.
For instance, Brandon has done a lot of artwork.
Yeah.
Inside windows around town, or outside windows, or whatever, and those have always been wonderful.
Yes.
They're temporary.
Agreed.
But they're temporary, and, you know, we,
Right.
best we could approve them.
But wouldn't it, you're a tax collecting entity, so you're a government entity, so if you did it, you'd
Yeah,
be
you're
exempt.
exempt.
Time to go.
And that's it. Good to see you.
As long as you have the property owner's permission, right? Am I wrong on that?
Well, I think, again, it comes under planning and zoning.
Yeah, it gets kicked away from us.
Governments are exempt. I am right? Can you say that loud? Okay.
But is the property, does the property that the stuff is being installed on have to be government owned? That's my question. That's where it's the sticky wicket.
That's the way I kind of understood it too.
Kind of just an interesting little jab. There are signs downtown that are not compliant with the code. City Hall, Community Arts Center, and the library. Their signs are not compliant with the sign ordinances.
Because they're public
Because
agencies.
they're public agencies.
Right.
But I think it refers to the building,
Yeah.
not the person who purchases
Yeah,
the.
but again, we, you know,
Yeah, it would come
We
under
can
planning and
figure
zoning.
something out.
yeah.
Well, I think that's it. I think you came into it with the right frame of mind. I think we need to keep the right frame of mind as we come to the conclusion and get a ordinance that, not everybody's gonna like everything. That's just a given, but one that works and achieves the goals that we're trying to achieve.
And I also want to add that, I mean, again, it's going to be on a case-by-case basis where the history of the building, the history of the area is taken into account for each one. And our board does change, you know, people rotate on and off, and I would say that that is a good thing because this is not a stagnant town, we are not stagnant people, and hopefully with the rotation, you know, people will continue to meet the needs and concerns of the community.
Well, and I think when you started out saying that now it's case by case, that's where your wiggle room comes in to the wording. And instead of not permitted or not
Right.
required, you can take everything into account for that specific situation and decide whether it's appropriate or not, instead of just saying yes or no. So I think with this question that we received about the wording of appropriate or will be considered, then when you start out in the front of this saying, this is a case-by-case consideration, that, to me, is where that applies to the whole thing, and every case will be considered individually.
And this is really geared towards the person that doesn't know regulations and historic preservation and buildings, and so you have to include all that so they understand as a new person what they're doing.
So I think that's covered on
Yeah,
both
I want to be sure we got that.
I know.
Somebody said it's on. Well,
Hi, I'm Steve Bottis.
I had a question.
And it's maybe just informative more than anything. If there were a building or a property that was outside of the historic district overlay, what's the procedure for that building being put into the overlay?
We wouldn't accept an individual building, I don't think. It would have to be an area that got added, so it couldn't be a building like in the middle of, I have my house on Maple, I want mine in the historic overlay. You'd have to convince all your friends and neighbors that whole section needed to be contingent to the thing. So if you look at our map, if it can be logically added in, and so then it has to go before
They have to come to us and ask for it.
and then
Yeah.
them.
In
So-
planning and zoning.
in planning and zoning. So it is a process, but it's also one of those, if you can convince people to do it, we'd be happy to.
Well, then, I was going to get to the point. When I purchased my building in 2012, it was not in the historic district overlay.
Yeah,
It was?
yeah, because that district was expanded in 2010 or 2011.
That's the thing,
I
is
think
when
maybe
was it
even
expanded?
earlier.
Because I thought when I
I left
purchased
in
it
2012 and it was done when I left, so it was before March of 2012.
for March of
Yeah,
2012.
so maybe, I think it was 2010. I feel like we did that expansion in 2010, maybe.
I don't remember now.
Yeah.
But
And
it-
it was precipitated by a property owner coming to the board and asking,
Probably the previous, yeah.
no, I think it
developer.
was, yeah, it was Stiff, that strip, that came and said, we want you to expand
That
this
may
block.
be old,
Okay.
that's at least 2010.
Yeah, yeah.
We could look
That
back
actually
pretty quick.
included a lot of Lexington Avenue who opted out.
Right, and KSD, because we didn't know the future at KSD, so we put that in, so there was a design review for any development that went on there.
I think that was just before you
And-
bought it, Steve.
I think so, yeah.
Down to Preston
Yeah.
Pruitt, yeah.
Now, also some of the other guidelines, that's classifications to my building, I think it's classified as downtown commercial. DT, it gets a DT designation, which is
The zoning.
basically everything, yeah. So, but now that falls into the historic overlay. Gotcha, thanks.
Does that affect the use of the building though? Being,
So when we talk about keeping it close to usage, the idea is that, okay, if, so for example, we'll use your building. It was a furniture store,
yeah, it's been,
and so the concern is that you won't have somebody taking a building that has these wide open spaces and then all of a sudden chopping them into very small spaces for offices or apartments, for example. Or if they do so, like keep the ground floor wide and retail, and then, you've got these upper levels that you can do much more with. So it's the concern of that buildings don't get chopped apart inside a lot is what tends to happen. Does that make sense?
The hub is it was a department store, but we figured out a way to still honor the
Yeah.
integrity of the building, but it's still got different uses. Right, yeah.
only issue sometimes is that smaller places are easier to rent. than
Yeah,
Yeah,
larger
it
places.
is, yeah.
But again, that hub, they did a nice job with the coffee shop and then the bookstore in back, and
Edward
so
Jones.
there's ways to do it. And I think, again, coming for review is
Probably the furniture
helps
store.
mitigate that.
Main Street Furniture is gonna be the next challenge.
Correct.
Yeah. It's a big building.
And And we,
A little bit similar to a plan for somebody that's a developer and they come to P and Z and they suggest what they want to do on that piece of property. Where previously citizens or any local government thought, no, we don't want that there, but if they come with a good plan, then they consider it, and that sounds like what this group would do, because if you do look at the hub, it wasn't a library, or it wasn't a bookstore, and it wasn't a coffee shop. It was a big open space, going back to what you mentioned previously. It can be done if you have a good plan, it sounds like.
And all we're concerned about is the facade. Whatever goes inside, if it doesn't impact the facade, then we don't,
Yeah, we're not gonna
So you could have
negate it.
yeah.
like a common entrance and then have
Right, yeah.
various.
And it works great in all kinds of downtowns all over.
Anyone else? Well, I want to thank you for your presentation and for the hard work that you've done, and we look for this proposal, this draft, to continue moving forward.
We just ask, again, that you have a conversation about murals and art, and look at that fast track list. That's D1, I think. And,
Page number?
hold on, let me see. I think it's
You don't have it
D1.
memorized, Julie? Come on.
I know. You should see the original document. I had so many pink Post-its that it became,
It's gonna be.
it's on page D1.
One, there you go, in the very back.
Yeah. If you just get a chance to look at those and maybe talk to Bridget about how some of these things could be, avoid them coming to us, if you feel like that's appropriate.
So how some of them can do what? Say that last statement.
You want to?
Oh, on page D1, but I think Tom can speak to it very well.
As an example, if you're wanting a sign on your building, your downtown property owner or business owner, and your sign meets the guidelines, and it's Thursday and you want to open Monday, and you should be able to show up at P and Z or Bridget's office or wherever deemed and say, I want to put a sign up, and they go, have a nice day, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But right now, they have to
You've got
come
to wait until
to
the next
us.
meeting.
Well, but in your proposal, you're asking us to consider the fast track thing, and I think if we're serious about being user-friendly, if it meets your guideline, and we've got this person sitting in that seat that's going to have housed all the expertise, I would not be opposed to him or her saying.
The complication
This
is
is a list here.
Bridget's not technically.
this is not my area of expertise.
I didn't want to say you weren't qualified, that's terrible.
right. I'm not.
To do preservation projects in the Heritage Council, you all know, with the preservation consultant. So I think the conversation needs to be, is it worth investing in the consultant being on call to approve these, or training somebody in the office? We don't know what the answer is, because, and she's already got a lot on her plate. I
Or
think.
training someone in P and Z.
Yeah, so,
That's
Well,
yeah.
I was just going to say that, Steve's bringing a lot of new ideas, so we still need to hear from him.
Yeah, but that is something out there we don't want
It
to.
just needs to be on the table
Yeah.
and it needs to move forward.
And if it's gonna be done, as you just described, my preference would be that it is someone that's local,
Yeah.
not a consultant.
Yeah, because it's going to cost you money every time they rubber
Not
stamp
so much about
something,
the money
so,
as the
yeah,
fact that this community is sort of getting
yeah.
Well,
concerned about.
the contract you signed for the certified local government does stipulate what kind of qualifications that staff has, and the Heritage Council has made that very plain to us as to what those are. So that is where we have to follow through with finding someone that's qualified. It's not just whether they've done it before or whatever. There's specific staff requirements that meet that.
Or the other option is just to continue doing it like we're doing it, and we'll just call a meeting in 24 hours, but I think it's just frustrating for the property owner
Sure.
that they gotta,
And it seems a little silly,
Yeah.
5 people all come in here and sit, and the meeting takes 3 minutes and
yeah,
Something you know already meets together.
yeah.
it's just a rubber stamp process.
Mayor,
I apologize. This discussion is making me think about more things. So what are the next steps? I mean, this is informative, and I'm really encouraged to hear how everyone is trying to find ways to give that wriggle room some life that is encouraging to everyone on a couple of issues, which you illustrated some of them tonight. I'm not sure if they're completely fleshed out yet, so, but you're getting closer, it sounds like. So what's the next step? Is this was a workshop? Is there's going to be a final vote and whatnot? And maybe if there's any other comment that might be addressed.
You guys will take this to
Well,
planning and zoning,
And
right?
they have to have a public hearing. right?
Yeah, it's been submitted to planning and zoning at the same time it's submitted to you, so that their process will follow through with having an actual public hearing. And then that'll be up to you all to decide if you want to wait till after that to make your decision and present comments and approve. So, because these are not something we can use until both bodies have approved them by ordinance.
Like I said previously, I would hope that we would have another meeting to discuss it more knowledgeably and with room for public comment at that time, too.
With planning and zoning as well.
Well, you saying both bodies have to approve, you're talking about the guys up the street as well as us?
No, just planning and zoning and the city commission,
Oh, just us?
because these don't impact anything but the city.
Does that help? It does. And when planning and zoning has their public hearing, it would be nice if they're informed so we can attend as well. Are we ready for a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Kevin always says can stay, right?